Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be finishing this one off, or at least hopefully. You can see here I've gone all the way up to the 3000. Just for a quick recap, this is a Jullian Stavreas fossil piece, and we went from that 60 grit Nova, 140, 280, 600, 1200, and then finished off with the 3000. And now we've got the higher grits to go, because some people say you can get a polish with a 3000, but I think it's a little bit of inexperience in knowing what a real polish is. Like this, you could say it's a pre-polish at best. For a real polish, I'll just grab a quick example. Like this stone here is polished. And that's finished off with the cerium oxide. The 3000 Nova Point does do a good job, but it doesn't get that kind of shine. You want a shine where the opal almost looks like it's still wet. So unless it looks nice and glossy like this, you're still a while off, and you can see here that that color is still a bit dull. And if I just give it a quick dunk in some water, you'll see how it just shines up a lot more. That's what we want it to look like. And that's what the cerium oxide would do. But instead of that, we're going to keep experimenting, because I haven't played with these high grit Nova Points in the past. So 8000, which I have tried in wheel form. 14,000, which I've never touched before. Or maybe I have used the 14 and I haven't used the 8. And then the 50,000, I've never used the 50,000 grit Nova Point or Nova Wheel before. So we're going to go with these three and see what kind of polish that gets us. Ideally, I'd be really happy if it did get like a proper kind of mirror polish, similar to this belemnite over here. But if not, I've always got cerium oxide, but in this case, because of the sand, I'll probably go for my aluminium oxide instead, just because it handles non-opal material a lot better. I don't think this area is actually going to polish. So when you think about a polish, it's just about that light bouncing off a nice smooth surface and reflecting well, which is what the water does when the water's on top. But because this sand here is so porous, I don't think we're going to get a polish on that. I'm just hoping to get a polish on all the little bits of opal that I've got revealed. Of course, there's the big chunk of the belemnite at the bottom and this shell piece at the bottom. But the rest of this, I just want to get a little bit of a polish on all of these little exposed opal areas. And I will be happy with that. Of course, the sand will stay, otherwise the whole thing will fall apart. And the entire aim of this one is to keep it together. And also to showcase Nova Points, rather than touching this at all with anything else. No sintered diamond burrs, no diamond paste, no aluminium oxide, no cerium oxide. This is just Nova Points, and we'll see how it ends up. Worst case scenario, we just hit it with a aluminium oxide at the end, which is perfectly fine. But we want it to get nice and glossy like this, so it really pops the color. So let's load up the 8000 at the starting point, and we'll just have a look, and I'll make a few comments along the way. It won't change shape at all anymore. This will be the final shape, but hopefully it does change appearance on the surface. So here we go. And away we go, 8000 grit Nova Point. Now, the first thing that I'll mention on this one is my Nova Point did not have so much of a point if you look at it here. It was a little bit worn flat at the top. Well, it just molded flat. You get these imperfections with Nova Points. And it's a little bit unfortunate though, because on the lead up to using this burr, all my other ones had pretty sharp points. So I could get into some areas that I couldn't quite reach with the 8000. I don't know how much this burr actually does on top of the 3000. I normally think that the 3000 burr doesn't really do much. But this 8000, it's really hard to feel if it's doing anything at all. You can't really see the burr wearing. You can't see a lot of opal getting removed. It's a little bit confusing. It's kind of like you're just using a diamond paste at this point. Except a diamond paste, I think, with a wooden burr still removes more than what this 8000 grit Nova does. The resin is pretty soft and the diamonds are pretty small. After running this burr, drying the piece and having a look at it, it does seem like it may or may not have actually done something. So it's interesting. I'll summarize how I feel about all these Nova Points at the higher grit range, and I really do need to use them a lot more. This is just first impressions anyway, so I've got to mess around a little bit more to give a final verdict on them, but I mean, it seems to do what it's meant to. You can see the opal itself has got some beautiful color, so we really do cross our fingers and hope that these Nova Points up to 50,000 actually work out. Now moving on to the 14,000, you can see here that the point was much nicer. The burr wasn't shaped quite so well. There's a little bit of unevenness to it, but for this higher grit stuff, when you're getting to the polishing, you're not going to end up causing any kind of ripples across the surface or anything like that. These really are not removing much material at all. so you really don't need to worry about it too much. The only thing you have to be careful of is vibrations. No matter the grit of the burr, if it's out of sync, if it's off balance, then you are going to have the vibrations. And on a piece especially like this, you've got to be really careful of that, because you will start hitting things you don't want to. And if you hammer the surface, you could break anything. The way I was holding it is very specific. There's some really strong areas and there's some really weak areas, or at least what feels like pretty weak areas. So I had to be really careful. But I was just happy that this one had a nice point to it, because it meant I could get into all the nooks and crannies that the 8000 couldn't really get into that well with the point removed. I'll form a point on it over time, just make sure that I reshape it. But yeah, you can see it's the same process. We're just going over the whole surface. It feels almost exactly the same as the 8000. You don't notice anything getting taken off. You don't notice any wear. These points will at least last a pretty long time. But at the same time, it's strange, because it's really hard to see if you've done anything at all. So you do need to look at each of these afterwards. After you finish polishing away, have a quick look at them dry and just make sure that there is some sort of change. Otherwise, you might need to keep at it. Even though after a 3000, you probably could jump to the 50,000. I'll try that at a later date, but it's probably a chance that it could work quite well. Just like jumping to cerium oxide or aluminium oxide after the 3000, even the 1200. And last but not least, the 50,000 grit, a very well shaped burr. I got pretty lucky with this one. It's always a bit of variation in these burrs, but this one is prime. It is absolutely perfect, which is good because it will wear incredibly slowly, I would think. And it feels like it's doing absolutely nothing, but we will see. Well, I won't spoil it now, but we'll just jump straight to the finished product. It's a very smooth burr. It feels very much like you're just rubbing plastic up against it because of how fine the grit is. It really doesn't feel like using a wooden burr and diamond paste at all. The resin really holds these diamonds nicely bound. I don't see a lot coming loose, though it'd be impossible to see with the naked eye really for 50,000 grit unless you had a whole pile of diamonds. Alright, and here we are at the end of it. So we just went through 8,000, 14,000 and 50,000 grit. And I've got mixed feelings on it. So it has gotten a shine. We'll just zoom right in to have a look at this. Now it's not the best example because I've left a lot of inclusions due to the keeping the shape more important than getting a nice clean stone. This is a fossil. It's more of a specimen piece, especially with this top end, which I will talk about later, but I do think that it's probably worth removing actually. It's not that interesting and maybe it can be removed without doing too much damage. But you can see here, ignoring these inclusions just here, if you look at that shine, it has got there, but I can promise you that I spent so long on this burr just to make sure I was giving it a fair go, and I am 99 to 100% sure if I went back to the 3000 Nova, went over this entire area again, fogged it back up, and then hit it with either the aluminium oxide polish or even the super cerium oxide, I would get the same, if not better result in, like a fraction of the time, a small fraction of the time. This took so long, and I mean, it's a nice opal. It's got some beautiful color, couple inclusions. Most of them you can't really get rid of without getting rid of too much of the fossil. And I still think you could pry these apart if you really wanted to, but I don't know, maybe Jullian really does like it being intact. The sandy areas, the Novas didn't really polish that up very much at all. It's too loose, it's too porous, it's too grainy. And I'm also worried that if hitting the sand with something like the 50 grit and something comes loose and scratches the surface of the opal, it could have a backwards effect on it. But yeah, it will get the job done. I'm thinking to give it another go. I'll just get one of my finished cabs, like a proper clean cab, and then just scrub it back to the 3000, then just go through these three grits again, and just compare that to the cerium oxide and aluminium oxide. I think it'll be a much easier task to give it a real good test, and I will test these burrs a little bit more, the higher grit Novas and the lower grit Novas. I'll test them a bit more on a couple stones, on camera and off camera, and I'll do a final review of them. But initial review, yeah, I think in terms of the timing and stuff, maybe for other stones, this 50,000 grit is a lifesaver, Because I mean, I live on these Nova points, especially the 280. I don't know how I'd be doing anything without the 280, 600, 1200, and 3000. But these higher grits, honestly, for Opal in particular, cerium oxide, or for Opal that has some non-silica based host stone like Boulder Opal, aluminium oxide, both of these will do a much better job in terms of the efficiency of it. And you don't want to spend countless hours using a 50,000 Nova. Also, the price of these powders in comparison to this, when you don't live in the US, is a real big thing as well. So yeah, I think it might have its applications. I reckon it'd be absolutely perfect for non-silica based stones where you need to use a diamond paste. As an alternative to diamond paste, I do like this a bit more than diamond paste, just because it's a lot cleaner. And I've never seen too much contamination moving up grits for the Nova points. It tends to hold its grit really well in the resin base, apart from the really low grit ones where you can actually see the diamonds come loose and you see them in the water. Even the 280, you can see that the diamonds are coming loose. You have to be a bit careful with that. But for these higher grit ones, it doesn't seem to be a huge problem. So I think in terms of a diamond paste substitute, it's pretty good because it's just the diamond paste, but it's bound within a resin. So that's my initial thoughts. I think this one I might just put it aside, and during a live stream we might just polish it up a little bit. I'll talk to Jullian as well because I don't think this top section is really adding much. It's a weird shape. I reckon that it could even be that there was a bell knight, a shell sat on top of that, and then a snail sat on top of both of those, because I'm getting some like gastropod kind of features in some of this sand up here where the opal is kind of forming. It seems to be possibly a bit of a snail shell. You can see it here where it just mounds up and over. I've really kept the shape intact, which is what Jullian wanted, but honestly, I don't think this area is adding much. There's a little bit of color. There might be a small piece up here that you could salvage out of it, but I think you'd get much more out of displaying this entire top part of the shell because it's got amazing color. It does have one crack, if I can show it. I don't know if it's a fully healed crack or not. It's just where that line of color goes up. So there is a little bit of a crack. I can't get the light to show it off, so maybe it is a healed crack and it's just a very sharp line in the color. But there is definitely something there that kind of comes up and over to here, which is why it makes me think that there might be some sort of crack in it. But really, nice little beryl knight, nice little piece of shell, a whole heap of mess at the top. And yeah, I just don't think it adds too much. It's got a bit of color, but it's not clean enough to be worth keeping in my opinion, but it is a wild looking random piece. That's all of Jullian's stones done. All 6 of them, I think it was. Some amazing beryl knights, and then following it up with this wild piece that I knew was always going to take 10 times longer than all those other pieces. And I don't know, it's got some color. It's interesting. It was fun to work on. It's always fun to work on fossil material that's a bit of a mess. And it was a good test for the new full range of Novas. There you can see that line. Just there. Looks very much like a crack. I just can't tell if it's fully healed or not. It seems to actually be fully healed, just because of the light glare across it. But on that note, I'm going to go work on a completely different stone, which will be coming up on the channel in no time. So I best get to work, and I'll see you guys in the next one.